Hi, good morning. My name is Santiago Ordonez, and this is my per-record presentation assignment. And today, the topic that I'm going to cover is learning a language, right? This is for a PNC professor. Okay, let's start right away with this. So the study of learning, language, and cognition is fundamental pillar of psychology. It's such an important topic. And in this presentation, it's an exploration of two scientific articles that I have found in a reliable source that is about the language development in young twins and the impact of restricted cortical lesion of auditory abilities in Japanese macaque. Sorry, it's kind of hard the title, but then let's go ahead with these two. And through these articles, I'm to comprehend the interconnect to biological, genetical, sociocultural, and influence language that we're learning in our life, and the complexities of animal subjects in cognitive psychology research, right? So as you can see in my presentation, that's my topic. Okay, let's move on. Sorry, I should present this one bigger. Perfect. Let's move on. Okay, for this, for all this presentation, I'm gonna bring some topics that we have covered in our class. Some of these are classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and social learning. So for the first one, we have seen a lot of times the Pablo experiments related with dogs and the principle of associating learning, right? So basically this involves the neutral stimuli with an important event resulting in a similar response in further events, right? That's basically the idea of classical conditioning. Then we can go deeper for each of these theories. Then we have the Skinner research that it's based on reinforcement and punishment. So basically, the idea in this it focuses on how behavior it's influenced by its own consequence, right? And then the social learning is a Bandler theory and the role of observation imitation. This one is kind of more recent, and this theory is based on the idea that people can learn from another person through observation, imitation, and modeling. Those are the factors. Okay, let's move on with the first one, that it's classical conditioning. The classical condition theory with Pablo theory, it's a theory that really he just discovered that dogs could condition it to salivate it or make him feel hunger at the sound of a bell. So after repeatedly this kind of the same model and repeatedly pairing the bell with the presentation of food, this has implication for understanding human behavior and learning. So as you can see in my left side of the slides, I've seen like a dog with a bell, which related, it's basically the whole idea of classical conditioning. But to go deeper, because this one is the one that I mostly focus, these two articles are the key principles of classical conditioning, right? So the first principle, as we can see, is the unconditioned stimuli. And what is unconditional stimuli? Unconditional is a stimuli that naturally and usually automatically, or in the case of the animals, we can say that is by instinct, that triggers a response without any learning needed. So let's say in this case, the food. The food, like as humans or as animals, we know that food is good for us and we just go and eat it. And that's the instinct that the animal have, in this case, a dog, right? The second one is the conditional stimulus. So the conditional stimuli is the one that is previously neutral, but then it becomes trigger for a learned response through an association with the unconditional stimulus that is the one that we previously discussed, right? So this one, it's before it's neutral, but then it becomes it is not neutral anymore, basically. Then the third one is the unconditioned response. The unconditioned response comes from the previous one, from the one above, that it's the unconditional stimulus. So that's basically the response of the unconditional stimulus, right? That's the response for this stimulus. And then the conditional response is the one that it's learned response to the previous neutral stimuli. So it's kind of the actual reaction that we have now. In the case of a dog, the conditioned response was the bell, and then he or like the dog go for food, right? After listening the bell. Okay, let's move on with the other one that was the Skinner theory. this is focused on the idea of reinforcement and punishment. So the reinforcement and punishment, it's an operant conditioning uses as a reward and punishment, and all this idea is in order to shape a behavior, right? We also have some other principles that it's shaping and chaining. Shaping involves a reinforcement step towards a desired behavior, while chaining it breaks down complex behavior into simple steps. So at the beginning, in the early stage of our life, sometimes we see like so complicated or complex behavior, but then like this chaining process, it becomes easy for us to understand and to follow this behavior. Then the other one, this is really important, is schedule of reinforcement. Skinner theory emphasizes different schedule of reinforcement. What the schedule means is kind of the radio or the frequency that the frequency, sorry, that this reward or punishment have happened and how we learn, right? So that at the end affect the maintenance and extinction of learned behaviors. If it's a good behavior, we maintain. If it's a bad, we extend that behavior. And then discrimination and generalization, it's the idea that where response depend on a specific stimuli, and generalization where response occur to similar stimuli. That's the whole idea. Okay, and then let's go quickly to the social learning Bandura theory. Bandura research is an experiment particularly with the voodoo doll experiment, demonstrating how children imitate the behavior of adults as they observe the adults interacting. So in this basic idea, in this experiment, the idea was that the voodoo, we have a voodoo doll, you know what it is, and the children just see the adults, how they act or how they interact with the voodoo doll, and then they do the same, basically. They just copy that. But some of the characteristics that I want to emphasize are observational learning. So as I mentioned before, the social learning theory emphasizes the importance of observing, modeling, and imitate others. So it's the idea of the experiment that they just see and they copy the same thing because it's a new stimuli that they're interacted with. What are the application for this? And this theory is basically in everything nowadays, since education, communications, or psychology, these three have significant implication in those aspects, because that's how we learn nowadays the things, and more important for trained children as well. And then another application that I have seen a lot is the media and technology, because this theory it's in everywhere, basically everywhere. So that's also how the apps or the social platforms works. Because if we watch a video and then we think, oh, that's a good behavior, that's how we're learning, or at least that's how new generations are being teaching to learn new behaviors, right? That's kind of evident in our society. Okay, after all this kind of background, I want to show you my two articles. The first article, it's a human article. It's a language development in young twins. This is a biological, genetical, and social perspective, right? That's how all the aspect that we're gonna touch in this presentation. First, that the author of this article is Peter Mittler, sorry, a renowned scholar in special needs and inclusive education. Later on, I'll explain why it's important to say this, because he really focused on special needs. And the study compares the language abilities of 204-year-old twins with 100 singleton control of the same age and similar social background. So that's really important, as we see in class, that the research is made kind of in similar circumstances, right? Okay, let's move on. Then we have the language development in young twins, right? That's how I want to explain. First, if you go to the top of the slides, you can see the research design and data collection methods. So that's the idea, it's how they do it. So they use Illinois test of psychological linguistic abilities, and it also investigates the influence of biological, social, and language development. right? How they impact with it. And then the theory and hypothesis tested was that the research showed that the examine delayed, it's a really important word, delayed in language development in twins compared to singletons, sorry, I hope I am not mispronouncing this word, and determine the impact of biological and social factors on language abilities. So that's the whole hypothesis that they tested, and they did it in different ways. And then the key findings and conclusion was that twins exhibit inferior language skills. That's sadly, but that's the true, that twins exhibit inferior language skills compared to the other people, and that reflects a delay of approximately 6 months in language development, which is not a big amount of time, but at the end it matters, right? Because then we should consider this in education. Sorry, I would like to move this thing. Okay, here we go. Sorry, that's a unique challenge faced by twins. That's a really important thing that I want to put in the slides, because usually we don't meet a lot of twins in real life, right? So what are the challenges that they have to face? It's something important to consider, because if we don't know how they're growing, how we can assume this, right? So one of the biggest challenges that they have is the individual identity. That's because twins might face difficulties in developing a separate sense of identity. Let's imagine if you have the same person that look the same, that in certain way behave the same, or tag in the same way in your own house. Imagine that. So it's such a complicated situation in your early life stage, because you've seen someone that is identical, same as you. That's a huge problem. Then at the end of the day, they will handle it, and then we'll solve it, we'll say it. And then a language model. So it's accessing the language model provided by the mother can be challenging for these twins, even for like singletons are challenging. Imagine for twins, sometimes it become more challenged, these kind of things, right? So that's a thing that we wanna take a look. Then we go for the factor influencing language development. What are the factors? In these slides, I want to focus on the debate of nature and nurture. Nature, in this way, it's the biological variables that we have, for example, the birth weight, the gestational age, and the reproductive complication that have some association with language. In this case, the author shows us data that support the idea that they have weak association with language scores at 4 years. But then in the other hand, we have the nurture side, which is the environmental factors. Social class and family size are strongly correlated with the language score. So particularly in singleton, but as well in twins. So that's a really important thing. And also we have a irritability index. Then I'll show you some data that support this. So then it's this index for language and development is 44% with variation in H2 over the 9 subtests. Later on, we can go through reference, and then you'll see some data that support this. Also, something important, we're in a psychology course, it's psycholinguistic abilities, and the zygosity analysis. Zygosity refers to an early stage where the human is basically a zygote. It's really premature stage. So the psycholinguistic abilities says that the twins psychology, the twins abilities consistently score lower than those on singletons. So that's a kind of a bad side for twins, that they score lower than the others. But the zygosity analysis, it didn't show like so many difference. It says that no significant difference between identical and fractal twins, and certain kind of exception that we can see, right? That's for the the psycholinguistic abilities. And then another aspect that I mentioned before that we're going to talk is language abilities and biological factors. As I mentioned before, the nature nurture side also impacts a lot in these kind of cases. So the birth weight and gestational period demonstrate a weak relationship with language score at 4 years, but the irritabilities, it's the highest for test sampling the visual motor channel and lower and lowest for testing the auditionary vocal channel. So that's basically that's how the research method that they use, right? So that's for this side of humans. So at the end, we'll do like some summary or some conclusion with this, but that's for the side of the human articles. Then another thing that's really like another aspect that it's really important in the investigation or in a research stage is how these things affect animals. And then I found this really interesting article written by Ricky Hemfer, a professor at the University of Toledo, that investigates the impact of cortical lesions on Japanese macaques. Sorry, let me drink some water. Sorry. So the whole idea of this experiment was that like discovered the effects of surgery in macaques. For example, a lot of times humans have to take surgeries for accidents, for everything. And these kind of experiments are crucial to determine how this surgery can be good or bad for the patient, right? For the person. So in this case, I want to follow the same model that we used in the previous one. So the first stage that they did, it was the research design and the data collection methods. So then we see that the study involved creating bilateral cortical lesion in Japanese macaques and carefully observing the impact on auditory capabilities and the vocalization discrimination. So as I was explaining before, they did a surgery in this side of the head of the macaques, and then they analyzed, they observed the impact of this surgery in their lives. So what were the hypotheses that they want to focus on the study? The focus revolved around understanding the distinct effects of different areas of superior temporal gyrus on vocalization, discrimination, and hearing abilities. So when they did this surgery, the macaques may become to hear less from any of these side on the vocalization, right? And what are the key findings on the conclusion of these articles? The findings indicate that substantial hearing loss and aphasia-like deficits result from a specific lesion, providing value insights into auditory processing and language comprehension. That's at the end, that's why we do these kind of experiments. It's nothing about not taking care of animals or just try experiments with them. It's basically because you Hello, sorry, I got I don't know, an accident, and then I didn't get internet and it wasn't recording. But anyways, I got to the last point from my previous recording was that we're doing these experiments, we're conducting this experiment, researchers conduct these experiments to try to do certain things in animals. And then if it's the case that we have to use these things for humans, we're not like so lost or we don't know what to do it, right? Okay, let's go really quickly to the study overview. What was the study overview was the hypothesis that I mentioned before, was testing the effect of lesions on hearing and discrimination abilities. Then how they do it, how was the research designed, was detailing the surgery and histological procedures, right? Behavioral training and threshold determination methods, right? So that's the part that we're gonna focus because we have covered some of these concepts in class. One is the behavioral training, and the other one is threshold. I hope I'm not mispronouncing, but the surgical procedure that is basically the handy job that the researchers did was the two-stage bilateral cortical lesions. Sorry, and then the behavioral procedures that, of course, would have to be supported through supported by psychology was training the monkeys discriminate vocalization, because at the end, that's how they can see if the experiment is working or not. But first, they have to train these monkeys, these macaques, to do that. And what were the key findings? Unfortunately, some of them, they got hearing loss and aphasia-like deficit. What is a hearing loss is resulting from lesions involving a small portion of these surgeries of the superior temporal gyrus bilaterally. It's kind of too complicated vocabulary, but that were the key findings, and also aphasia like deficit. It was the result from a lesion of the primary and the secondary auditory cortex. That, of course, also something that we cover in this class on the brain structure and all the process that it involves, right? So there's some of issues that we have. Then we go for lesion impact. What happened with them? So the lesion in different areas of superior temporal gyrus have varying effects on hearing and discrimination abilities. As I was mentioned before, depending on the lesion, the monkeys will have less hearing capabilities and also discrimination abilities. So we see for the left side, it's a middle portion lesions. So that's resulting in a partial hearing loss and other things, but I don't want to focus like so on detail on this, because the most important things are the psychological effect that it has, the ventral portion lesions, but as well as partial hearing loss or no effect of vocalization discrimination, right? That's kind of better. And also the last one is the dorsal superior temporal gyrus lesions. There's no apparent lesion, hearing loss or effect on vocalization and discrimination, right? So that's something positive, right? Because no one get hurt, but also the researchers found that if we do some surgery in this kind of area of the brain, will not have so much damage, right? So that's something good for us. Let's go ahead with linking these two articles. How we can linking? As I was mentioned before, research should do this kind of biological experiment with animals because they have some invasive procedures, as we see in the left side. In the left side, we have an example of human subjects that's our language development and studying social cultural influence and complex language development. That was the case of the twins. They could analyze these kind of things and see what are the effects. But also in the right side, we have the biological mechanism that's investigating a specific biological mechanism and conducting invasive procedures. And for this kind of a scenario, we need certain animals to analyze because some procedures are not ethical in this. Some of the examples for this is of these two articles are in the left side, going for human subjects are the understanding disorders, role of different areas of the brain in auditory process and language comprehension. So there were one implication for the article, actually kind of both article, but more focus on the macaques article. So we understand the disorders. And for the right side, it's biological mechanism. So insight into the role of different area of the brain, as I was mentioned, in auditory process and language comprehension. One of the insights can be also that we learned from the macaque experiment that if we do it in the dorsal superior temporal gyrus lesions, we will not have a lot of hearing loss, right? Okay, let's go ahead to summarize all this detailed information that I have given to you. So in summary of biological and sociocultural influence, it's in the twins articles. There is enough evidence to say that there is a 6-month delay in language development in twins compared to singletons. So we kind of have to have or also be aware to have this program with the special needs. That's why I mentioned too that the author is focused on this, and it's great that we have this kind of investigation, this kind of research evidence this and prove this. And then another thing that I mentioned before was the heritability index, that it was a 44% for language development in twins. And the last one, it's more related to the macaques procedure, that it is the invasive procedures that benefits of using animal subjects for invasive procedures and isolating specific variables. So of course, we have seen that in the scientific method, we have to isolate some specific variables in order to have a great experiment. That's the last thing that I want to mention, is that the contribution for future research, this research and as well as many research also help to future researches or future investigations. So these two studies shed light on intrinsic dynamics of learning. As I mentioned before, that's the most important topic that we cover here, as well as some of the theories that we mentioned in the first part. Also, the language and cognition, providing a rich foundation for future research and practical application. In terms of practical application, we have seen some invasive procedures in the Makakis article that's related to psychology and neuropsychology. And these kind of experiments, when we link it, they serve as a bridge between biological, genetical, sociocultural, also human and animals, because sometimes we see that we are not so different. So these kind of experiments unraveling the complexity of language development and auditory processing, right? That is all for my presentation. Here are the reference. Also, another reference that I would like to put out, it's the class material, which was so helpful. So thanks so much. That's everything.